Hi. So I wanted to record some of my thoughts after watching the season finale of Lovecraft Country. This will be very naturalistic because I'm trying to also cook early this morning for dinner tonight in an effort to be organized. So if you hear rattling and stuff, that's me cooking dinner. Uh, But yeah, I just wanted to talk about some of the things that happened, my overall feelings. Um, this is me chopping an onion, if you hear that. Uh, I just wasn't thrilled. I think overall this season, I just haven't been wowed, except for the first episode, and that's because I didn't know what was in store. I think part of the reason might be because I had very high expectations going in. Um, I watched a lot of Misha Green's work with Underground. I thought it was very well done. Uh, in fact, Underground was one of my favorite shows uh, of that year when it came out. I thought it was really poignant. I thought it had a lot of good things to say, a lot of striking set pieces. There's just a lot that was happening within the, if you want to call it a genre, the genre of slavery narratives on screen that wasn't happening at the time, and I think still hasn't happened since. So, not Lovecraft Country, Underground was such a great show, and I wish that there were more shows like it on television, not necessarily about slavery, but just showcasing black life. Um, and not everything has to be about the black plight in America, but it was just nice to see something original being done in a genre that can be so. It's already depressing. You're talking about slavery. And Underground was many times a depressing show, but there was still something fresh about it that I appreciated and that resonated with me, and I think resonated with a lot of people because people were angry when it got canceled for its second season or after its second season. So yeah, long story short, I loved Underground. So when Lovecraft Country was announced, I was very excited to see what Misha Green was going to do next. And I'm still excited for what she has in store for her career, but I'm just uh, let down by Lovecraft Country. And it really pains me to say that because of everything I said prior. The show had a lot of good ideas, a lot of good things to say, but it seems like it was more focused on those ideas and also more focused on showing how smart it was, which we could have found out as the season went along exactly what the series wanted to showcase to us. But it was just very heavy handed in some spots. It was. I don't want to say boring, because it wasn't ever boring. But I think it was boring in the sense that it just never gave audiences a rhyme or reason as to why certain things were happening. We were supposed to just trust the process without uh, really having any kind of, I don't know. We didn't have like assurance that things were going to actually make sense in the end. And I'm still not sure if things ever made sense during the season finale. So it's just really frustrating. Um, it's a season that wants to be very important. And given the fact that it was given the prestigious treatment of immediately having a podcast and immediately the Langston League making its unofficial syllabi and immediately sparking think pieces and um, generating talk in that fashion. It wanted to be important, but did it live up to its own hype? Is this a case of the emperor not wearing any clothes? I think maybe it's yes and no to that question. Um, I think it's always a trap when a show wants to deem itself more important than it's actually earned the right to call itself. I think a show's importance should speak for itself. It shouldn't rely on so many outside tactics, such as how Lovecraft Country, as I said, has a podcast. They have that sanctum thing, that virtual space thing, where they do things that may or may not pertain to the show. I'm not sure. I know the next thing coming up for the Sanctum is Janelle Monáe performing, and it makes sense since her whole thing is about Afrofuturism. But does the show merit that? Is it just about the bells and whistles of being an important show without actually being an important show? That's what I'm wrestling with. And that's what I'll have to discuss in my eventual review. I have a lot of things happening at the moment professionally, so I'm trying to make time to actually work on my site this week. Last week, between having different obligations and maybe some poor time management and just some health things happening, standard stuff, nothing major. I didn't really have a lot of time to actually work on my website last week, so apologies for that, but I'm trying to get back to it this week. But anyway, I'll have to eventually talk about that in my review, about how I think the show really wanted to earn a title that it had to work for, but it felt like it didn't need to work for it. It felt like it was already it. And I think there's something to be said about a show's confidence. I think confidence, like in people, truly shows itself when you don't have to announce it. And it might be rude to compare Lovecraft Country to Watchmen, since they're both on HBO and they're both dealing with black issues and have black casts. But let's do that for a second, because I feel like it's an apt comparison. Watchmen, on the one hand, didn't have to have a tie-in thing, and there was a podcast, I believe, but there wasn't all this other tie-in stuff that happened with it. There wasn't a syllabus, and of course that is unofficial. It's not with HBO, and I do think it's a valuable resource, that syllabus, because I highlighted it in my Lovecraft Country talk for Pioneer Con recently. But it didn't have as many bells and whistles as Lovecraft Country did coming out the gate. And it told a succinct story that had multiple layers, similar to what Lovecraft Country is trying to do, but it told it in a way that was straightforward and that made linear sense. Even while telling a story about time travel, essentially, which is also like Lovecraft Country. Uh, Overall, I just think Watchmen did a better job. Um, and maybe the problem lies in either us as critics and or viewers um, wanting it to be like Watchmen, or it lies with the writers who maybe wanted it to be like another Watchmen, or HBO. Um, Maybe the assumption of it being another Watchmen is wrong. But I think a lot of us want it to be a quote unquote another Watchmen because Watchmen was so spectacular. Um, Even though I think after having read Watchmen growing up that you probably need to read Watchmen before watching Watchmen the series to get all of the Easter eggs. I think even without it, it tells such a poignant story about one moment in history and how that moment in history can affect other moments coming after it, other generations coming after it. And that story of lineage, again, like Lovecraft Country, is something that I feel was told much more poignantly and much more succinctly and much more elegantly, to be frank, in Watchmen. So where does that leave Lovecraft Country? I feel like it is, just by its nature, an important show in the sense that it is telling stories of Black America, the good and the bad. It's also telling stories of America in general. Uh, and I'm gonna say white America because uh, that's that's how America was set up, to have this dichotomy of black and white. And uh, seeing whiteness as a construct played out is something that many Americans need to see, especially in these times. Uh, and I think we can say the phrase "especially in these times" for any time, but especially since we're in an election season, a nerve-wracking election season, um, and we have had George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and so many other people who have been killed by police. We've had people killed many years before. We've had hundreds of thousands, probably millions of Black Americans killed at the hands of white supremacy ever since America proper was founded. So we always need to know this history. But it is especially poignant in 2020 when we've endured so much that we need to know this. So, yes, Lovecraft Country is an important show. Is it a good show? I think is the better question. And I think as far as wanting entertainment, that's something that Watchmen could also deliver on. It was poignant. It did tell hard truths, but it was also entertaining. And it also was fascinating and loved the world that it created. With Lovecraft Country, I don't know if I see that same enjoyment, that same love of world building and of creation. There's more of a love on getting ideas out, but there's not really a love on characterization, or a love for, rather, characterization, world building, things like that. There's more of a love for concepts, and I think that's where the show fails. Um, we don't get attached to anyone. We don't truly understand anyone. We're told things about people. Like, for instance, we're told things about Letty, such as her being a flake, her always using Ruby, apparently, for things, but we've never truly seen it. And when we do see it, it makes sense sometimes that she would be coming to Ruby for help, because that is her older sister. Um, and Ruby, which I've talked about on Facebook already and on Twitter, she's made to be, I don't know how we're supposed to feel about her because we're supposed to feel sympathetic that she is a black woman trying to do right in a society that wants to see her fail. But she's also a black woman who uh, hates herself, which can also be sympathetic, but it's done in a way to where she not only hates herself, she doesn't try to rectify it. She wants to be white. She changes literally into a white woman um, to both try to uplift the black girl that got what she thinks is her job, and also tear that same black girl down. So she's self-hating. She deals in respectability politics. She thinks that the only thing holding black people down is us not supposedly playing by the rules, and that she's owed because she plays by the rules or whatever. When the rules are meant to change on a whim because they're meant to serve white Americans. And it's like, she claims she's smart, but she's not smart enough to see that. And it's frustrating because I think she could have been a much more layered character. She could have still had these same problems, but she could have evolved over time. Instead, she became a character who got stuck on a white man who eventually became a white woman, and she stays with this person regardless of what Letty tells her, of what anyone tells her, even probably what she tells herself, because she's constantly lying to herself about her own selfishness. So I think Ruby particularly is a failure on the writer's part because she could have been so much more layered and poignant, using that word again, of a character, but she just ended up being closer to a stereotype than anything. It doesn't help also that Ruby, and this is not Wunmi Masaku's fault, but it doesn't help that this characterization is put on who we would, who when I guess when I say we, I mean how America would see someone who looks like Wunmi Masaku, a bigger, darker skinned black woman. We've seen how these types of women have been portrayed in American propaganda before, and it's frustrating that that same type of characterization covered in bells and whistles is put on this type of character again. And she's not given any types of layering whatsoever. So that's frustrating. Also frustrating, Montrose. He's given much more time to be sympathetic. We're supposed to root for him and want him to unleash his own demons from his past. Yet, the show is almost asking us to get over the fact that he killed a queer person in cold blood while he himself is a queer person, and that other person that he killed was also an indigenous person. And I know the point that was trying to be made of the colonizers and the colonists, and how the colonists can become the colonizers by taking on the violence of the colonizers. But I think there could have been another way to do it. I don't know exactly what that way could be right now, but I think there could have been a way to do it that would have gotten the point across and would have saved the show some heartache over the decision to have Montrose kill Yahima. Um, so that sticks with me, especially the fact that one episode he's killing Yahima, the next episode it's as if he's being rewarded for doing so by having a huge coming out party, essentially. So how am I supposed to feel about that? I don't like I don't like black liberation being at the hands of further colonization, if you will, further violence, further white supremacist tactics, because white supremacy is not related to um, who we call white people. Whiteness is a construct all its own, just like blackness, in essence, is a construct. I am an African American, but America paints me and everyone like me as quote unquote black, which doesn't mean African American. It means hateful person. So, uh, so white supremacy can be a construct that other races can utilize, and that's the point that's trying to be made. But that angers me because having Montrose use white supremacy as a weapon against Yahima shouldn't be rewarded with him feeling free. And of course, he should feel like he should be himself. But the point is that he shouldn't be rewarded for using white supremacy, and that his reward is that that's how he can be himself. That makes no sense to me. Um, and I guess that goes with Ruby too. She uses white supremacy in her own way, and it's it's a fault of the show that Ruby seems to get punished for it, whereas Montrose gets rewarded for it. So there's a lot of things happening that I don't think people really had a closer look at what the interactions of the characters actually were. They were more concerned with the ideas and the concepts and uh, being smart. And it's frustrating to me because also at the same time, I don't want to denigrate people's hard work. It's hard work to write a script, and you don't create just to make people mad. Um, you don't create to upset people. But as a critic, I have to talk about these things, and that's where I feel like Lovecraft Country provides us some other things to discuss, not just in their successes, but also in their failures. And I think that's one good reason why critics are valuable, is that we have a platform where we can talk about how a project's successes and failures contribute to the overall conversation about how we should view each other, interact with each other, change our viewpoints, listen to others, etc. Anything involving criticism can move a conversation forward and can change society in ways we don't even recognize. Um, Again, I guess to close, I can close with Watchmen bringing more attention to Tulsa and the atrocity that happened there. And now there's beginning to be um, legislation, I believe, on a local level, um, and other types of movement around remembering Tulsa and giving back to Tulsa and recreating a Black Wall Street and all these things. So I think these shows are powerful, and I think Lovecraft Country, in its own right, moves the conversation forward. But I think it is moving the conversation forward in ways that it didn't think it was going to, ways that it didn't plan for, and in part, it's moving the conversation forward through some of its failures. So that's my thought. That's me thinking out loud about Lovecraft Country. Again, if you heard things in the background, that's because I'm trying to cook, but I actually quit doing some of those things because I was trying to focus on what I had to say. So, hopefully this helped you in some way to digest this season of Lovecraft Country.